Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all on today's talk about India-Ireland Friendship Lecture Series on promotion of mediation and alternative dispute resolution perspective from India and Ireland. And to enlighten us on this legal topic, we have with us two guests, Mr. Bill Holohan, who is with us in the embassy, and Mr. A.J. Jawad, who has joined us online from India. Before we begin, I would like to give a brief introduction of our guests. Mr. Bill Holohan is solicitor and senior partner of Holohan Lane LLP Solicitors, Cork and Dublin. Mr. Holohan is unique among Irish solicitors, a fact recognized by the September 2020 decision of the Irish government to award him a patent of precedence, as a result of which he became one of the first solicitors in India to become a senior counsel solicitor. And prior to this, in another historic precedence, in year 2000, he had also been appointed as a notary public for two counties, Cork and Dublin, by the Chief Justice of Ireland, whereas notaries normally being nominated for single jurisdiction only. As a senior and experienced legal practitioner in professional practice for over 40 years, he has authored 9 legal textbooks in the areas of professional practice, commercial law, bankruptcy, personal insolvency, and insurance professional. He has been presented multiple awards in the recognition of his contribution towards legal service. Presently, he is serving multiple roles as Council Member of the Law Society of Ireland, Chair of the Law Society Professional Indemnity Insurance Committee, Member of the Law Society Alternative Dispute Resolution Committee. Mr. Jawad is mediator and trainer in mediation. He is Senior Mediator Trainer for the Mediation and Conciliation Project Committee of the Supreme Court of India and the Tamil Nadu Mediation and Conciliation Center at the High Court of Madras. His experience includes conducting basic and advanced training in mediation, as well as training of trainers and civil commercial mediation training courses in universities.
At the outset, I must thank my very dear friend, Bill Holohan, and also my esteemed guest from India, Mr. Jawad, for kindly accepting our invitation to address this India-Ireland Friendship Series. When we launched the Friendship Series lecture last year, the idea was that we should connect virtually people from India and experts from Ireland to discuss common themes of mutual interest. And this was an important initiative from our side because having been in Ireland for some time and having explored different counties of Ireland, I was very struck by the similarities between our two countries. For a moment, if you leave aside the minor difference of size between India and Ireland, there are so many commonalities and similarities. First of all, we both are very vibrant democracies. We both are republicans. We both are transforming our societies, overcoming long colonial exploitation. And if you look at, it's a very remarkable story that I see in Ireland, how a badly exploited country with no resources, no industries, and basically an agrarian farming-based economy, how it has transformed into one of the pioneers in innovation, research and development, IT, medtech, pharmatech, fintech, aviation, startups, a mega cluster that Ireland has become. And it's a source of great inspiration to me personally. And same way I see India is also trying its best to overcome huge mega issues that we have. And also in terms of learning from each other. I see we both can benefit by sharing our experience in dealing with multiple issues, both on the development front, socio-economic transformation, but also on the governance front. As democracies, we both have a lot in common. And although the complexity and scale in India is very different from Ireland, but basic issues are quite similar. How do you deal with plurality? How do you give confidence to all constituents of your population where there are inequities in existence? And how do you give a sense of participation and equal ownership of every citizen? And in that context, I feel, and also the challenges which are emerging for democratic societies relating to like influence of technology, influence of external toolkits to mobilize public opinion abroad, and also the growing disparities and the globalization issue. Globalization is there, but a lot of presumptions behind globalization are in question. So there are a lot of issues relating to contemporary societies and challenges, emerging issues in our land in India. They are very similar, very common. And that is why I think it's very important for us to have a broader connect, broader conversation, dialogue, not being judgmental, because we both have different experience and we wisdom to teach the other. But we must have the humility to learn from the other, from the experience of other. And judiciary and legal sector is one area which I think we have really a lot to learn from. Because our systems are similar, and also we both have similar legal norms. Ireland inspired us very deeply when we were drafting our constitution. And also in terms of handling of cases, our judiciary, the challenges before the judiciary are also somewhat similar. And in India, one issue which I feel needs very serious attention, and not only from the institution, but government, but also from public, how to make justice speedy. Because justice delayed is justice denied. And the delay in processing of judicial cases has very profound impact, both from the victim and also grassroots level people, but also for big investors and all other actors in the society. They all depend on enforcement of their rights by the judiciary. And if judiciary does not deliver in time, then the whole confidence of public in the democratic institutions is eroded. So when we learned about Mr. Holohan, my wife and I were very honored, very privileged to welcome you at our home. And since then, we have become both of us have become great fans and admirers of yours. So your expertise and special personal passion in alternative dispute resolution mechanism attracted us a lot. And we are very delighted to have this discussion today. And also, I must thank you that unwittingly I troubled you a lot, harassed you a lot, not knowing that you were in the hospital. But it's like extraordinary generosity of yours that even from the hospital bed, you kept replying to my WhatsApp messages and emails and giving me inputs and guidance on legal queries that I had. You are a true encyclopedia to me, and one single point of reference on legal constitutional matters. So I really value your friendship, and also I really admire your genuine spirit of friendship with India and Indian Embassy. And this platform where you are discussing your similar issues, common issues with the counterpart in India, I think this is the real value of a forum like India-Ireland Friendship Series. Now, this is, I think, first real dialogue and conversation between India and Ireland that we are privileged to. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your words and for your friendship. I consider myself very fortunate actually to have met you and your wife. The first day you invited me to your house, I thought it was related to business. So I was coming for a formal meeting, and I had the immense pleasure of being welcomed to take a meal with them. They welcomed me into their homes and their hearts and their friendship. So it means a lot to me as well. So I was only too glad to respond. And I think the title of this series is actually very important. And when I'm aware that the format for a lot of the previous presentations has been someone standing at a podium giving a talk as if they're lecturing, and everybody's expected to listen and to nod and say, "Oh, how wise they are!" And yes, yes, and applaud at the end. But initially, and again, I'm honoured for the invitation. When the invitation came, and the word friendship struck me straight away, and I said, "I have a friend in India who would be perfect and would fit the bill, if you pardon the pun, in terms of the other hand to deal with this." I had the great pleasure again of meeting AJ last year in Belfast, and we found that, to use an expression here in Ireland, we got on like a house on fire. Now we'll give the lecture explaining what all that means at a later stage. But we had a shared interest and a passion in alternative dispute resolution and mediation in particular. AJ has heard me before explain my path to this is that I say to people, I worshipped in the satanic church of litigation for 25 years before I converted to the one true church of mediation and peace. There's a famous Irish revolutionary from over 100 years ago, Padraig Pearse, and he wrote about the education system in Ireland, saying that was the murder machine. But in Ireland now, and from what we read here in Ireland about the court system in India, I say that the Irish court system is the murder machine, because it is an adversarial conflict system which drives people apart, not brings them together. It doesn't provide resolution. It'll give an answer, it'll give a determination, like an adjudication, a ruling, or a finding, but it won't provide a satisfactory outcome for people. Because up to just over 200 years ago, legally, you had the right to resolve your dispute with somebody by getting that whoever won because the divine entity, your God, was on the side of that individual. Forget that they were, 3.5 meters high, around and across, and they were up against somebody who was only a meter high. That didn't matter. Force didn't matter. Power didn't matter. Legally, they would win. So that was my path to mediation. And AJ had something similar. Do you want to fill us in, AJ?
Yeah, Bill, thanks for sharing your experience. I think we have discussed this earlier also. And in fact, I recorded that quote of yours about your conversion to the true church of mediation. Well, I had a similar experience actually, because I enrolled as a lawyer way back in 1988. And for almost 25 years, I continued an adversarial practice. And somehow I was just not happy about it. Even those cases which I won left a feeling of emptiness, because I found that my clients were not really happy even after winning. So I felt that there was something wrong with the system, the way it was working, because what we have done is actually basically, disputes involve human beings. Conflicts, involve human beings, and human beings have emotions. And somehow there was no space for expressing these emotions in the legal system, or what we call as the justice delivery system. Because our justice delivery system, again, is based on the Anglo-Saxon model of the positive law theory. So when I found that, in fact, it was an accidental discovery for me. I was passing by the court one day and I saw this big board over there, Tamil Nadu Mediation and Conciliation Center in my high court. I just walked in to find out. I was curious. I walked in to find out what it is all about. And then I met Mr. Sriram Panchu over there, who's regarded as a pioneer of mediation in India. So he had started, this was the first mediation center to be set up in India. So I walked in there and I met him, and he explained to me what mediation was all about, and suggested, why don't I undergo training? So I came back, I told my wife about it. She was also interested. We went back and we registered for the training. And after undergoing the training, it was a sort of a eureka moment for me, where I realized that what I found missing is perhaps something that mediation can fill. Because mediation will give space to the people to express what they feel about the whole dispute. It's not about what the law thinks about this. It's what the people feel about it and what they feel about the relief that they get out of the legal process. So that was a sort of a revelation for me. And I too, like you, converted to the one true church of mediation. So that was my journey. And after that, there has been no looking back. In fact, I gave up my litigation practice and I started doing mediation full time. And I was fortunate enough to be selected as a trainer also. And that contributes a little to my income because mediation as such in India has not taken off the way it should have taken off by now. But it is fast catching up. I think we can discuss that a little later, perhaps. But it is making a remarkable progress. And we're hoping that one day we will have a legislation which will, give the necessary gravitas to the concept of mediation.
Why don't you fill us in on the situation in India? I mean, only last week in the Irish Times, there was an article describing the backlog in the Indian court system. You have an Anglo system.
Yeah.
We equally have an Anglo system. The lawyers from each court system would be very comfortable with the other because the robes, the English language being used in the courts, it's all very similar. But there was an article in the Irish Times only last week saying that if all the cases in the Indian court system at the moment were to go to hearing, it would take 30 years just to clear the backlog at the moment. So what you said it hasn't taken up in India. What has the development in India been like?
Actually, mediation started in India effectively from 2005. The Civil Procedure Code was amended sometime in 1999 based on the recommendations of the 129th Law Commission, I think. So the commission had recommended that we implement processes like mediation to resolve the case backlog. But the amendment came sometime in 2009 and it was notified only in 2002. But even after the notification, it remained a dead letter law simply because the section was worded in such a complicated way that nobody took it seriously and nobody really tried to understand what exactly it was all about. Then we come to 2005 when we started the Mediation Center. But still, the concept was not very clear in the minds of either the judges or the lawyers or the litigants. In 2010, there was a landmark judgment of the Supreme Court in what is known as the AFCONS case, where the Supreme Court reread the entire Section 89 and made it more simple for the judges to implement it, and also said that if you don't refer a case to mediation, if you see elements of settlement, and you don't refer a case to mediation or any of the alternate dispute resolution methods that are prescribed under Section 89, you have to give reasons for not doing so. Whereas you don't have to give reasons if you refer the case. So that sort of, induced, induced may not be the right word, that sort of motivated the judiciary to take a serious look at it. And a lot of work has been done by the Mediation Conciliation Project Committee of the Supreme Court, which was formed in 2005. They took this up very seriously, and trainings were held in different states, and a lot of progress was made. And lawyers, there was a time in 2005 when we started training lawyers. We had to go from chamber to chamber requesting lawyers to come and take part in the training. But today we have a waiting list of lawyers waiting to get trained as mediators. So that is the kind of transformation that has come about. But we still have a long way to go because there are various reasons for that. One of them is perhaps a very cultural, something to do with the way our culture, what it tells us to do. Like we are a very hierarchical culture, okay? We are a high context culture. So we have a lot of deference to authority, the way we are brought up, at least up to my generation, because the millennials have changed now, okay? We always defer to authority. So when you're suddenly, because mediation expects you to take decisions on your own, and that becomes a big challenge for people who are used to being told what to do. So this was one thing that was holding back. But what I find now, because I work a lot with students, I train them, I coach them for competitions, and I interact a lot with the students. And I find that they are embracing this concept readily, much more readily than they are, accepting litigation. Because today's generation is, a quick fix generation. So they want everything fast. So they don't really have the patience to, go through the process of litigation. So they believe that mediation is the next big thing to happen, and they are embracing it like anything. So that is a very, very hopeful sign that, mediation will really catch up in India to the level that we would like it to be, as perhaps the mainstream dispute resolution process. So you go to mediation first, and if that fails, only you go to any other legal process. So we are hoping to achieve that. And we are also hopeful that the government of India will pass the legislation quickly, because that will make a huge difference. That will give the necessary gravitas to mediation, because there's otherwise this concept that mediation is a very simple process where you just make two people sit across and ask them what their problem is and tell them a solution. So still a lot of this kind of a misconception still exists, even in the minds of some judges, some lawyers. So once the law comes, perhaps the gravitas will sink in. That mediation is a very serious process, a very nuanced process. And one thing I just want to say before I stop on this point is that what I find is when we train lawyers in mediation, they convert, like how we did some time back. They convert. And as they say, there's no fanatic like a converted fanatic. And they become fanatical about mediation. So that is a very positive thing that we are seeing everywhere. Wherever we go and conduct the trainings, we find lawyers coming and telling us that, so I think, I don't want to practice litigation anymore. I think I've been wasting my time. Let me become a full-time mediator. So this is what we hear. And that is something which is really satisfying.
I mean, there's a similar experience here in Ireland, because again, the amount of litigation has grown exponentially. I mean, the ambassador has referenced the huge growth in business and commerce and industry in Ireland. Now, with that, you have all sorts of interactions between people. That sometimes leads to conflict. So the demands on the court system in Ireland have increased exponentially in my generation. But the Irish inclination is they want to have their day in court. Now, they don't understand it's not the day in court they need. They need someone to listen to them, make them feel heard, make them feel understood. And the role of a mediator is to try and get each side to understand the other side, why they are taking the position that they. Mutual understanding and respect is the foundation for some, I can see.
Yeah, sorry, Bill, I just lost the connection for a few seconds there.
No problem. I was just saying that once you have that mutual respect and understanding of each other, you have the basis for possible resolution. Whereas in court, the idea is to make the other person look bad, make their case look bad. It's a very destructive, negative inquest, and it's backwards looking all the time and nitpicking. Whereas mediation, the joy of mediation is being able to identify something on which the parties can agree for the future, and it's forward looking. Equally, I'm very interested in what makes people tick, as in how they work, and what makes people tick. And sometimes it's more than the age of the difference. But if you go to try and settle in traditional talks, it's like two armed camps coming towards each other, and somebody goes out with a white flag on each side. But immediately, I want the world. And if they're going to settle somewhere in between what the other side want and what they want, they have to give up things. And it's a negative psychological process. Whereas with mediation, you try and get people to identify, that's what you want. You might want a bucket of ice cream. Now, in my case, I love ice cream, but it's not good for me. So, sometimes what people want isn't good for them. And if you get them to focus on what they need in order to operate for the future, and if you can deliver more than that, it's a very positive process. It's an enhancing, it's an enriching process. So this is the joy that we as mediators find in helping people to resolve things. But that's not true for all our colleagues. Certainly in Ireland, the gatekeepers are the lawyers. And the lawyers think that the acronym for Alternative Dispute Resolution is ADR. And unfortunately, lots of lawyers think ADR stands for Alarming Drop in Revenue. In other words, that they're going to lose on fees. And they don't realise that actually the earlier you can resolve something for somebody, the more grateful they will be, the richer they will be because they won't have spent a fortune. But comparatively speaking, you'll be much more rewarded, not just in fees, but in terms of the satisfaction you get from helping people. Now, lawyers will tell you, whether it's true or not, that their vocation for becoming a lawyer is because they want to help people. You know, they want to take on the state and want to create new law, but then they have to live too, so they have to get fees. But helping people resolve things sooner rather than later is the joy. But in Ireland, there is this resistance among the lawyers. What do you find about the colleagues in India who are still worshiping in the satanic church of litigation?
I think we have come a long way, actually, because some years back, I was sent to a place called Srivilliputturu, which is in my state district. And when I went there, there were about 300 to 400 lawyers in the Bar Association hall. And I was supposed to talk to them about mediation. And the response was totally hostile. They said that this is a conspiracy against the legal profession. You're here to kill our profession. You're here to kill our livelihood. What happened was a very young lady stood up and she recounted an experience of hers where her sister-in-law was pregnant and was taken to the hospital for the delivery. And though it should have been a normal delivery, the doctor performed a cesarean on her. She said, we felt very bad about that. And don't you think our clients will also be feeling the same way if we don't give them the kind of solution that they need and we prolong those cases? So there was pin drop silence after that, and they heard me about mediation. But when I contrast that with, just 2 days back, I was in a district called Tuticorin. The High Court had sent me there to talk to the judges, the lawyers, and the mediators to see how they can improve the mediation over there. And I found a remarkable difference this time because the lawyers were very welcoming. And in fact, one of the presidents of the local bar association, he said that, if you resolve your client's disputes faster, they will regard you as a lucky lawyer and they will come to you with more matters. And I also cited to them a statistic that the Niti Aayog had published very recently. Niti Aayog is the planning body in India. I think His Excellency will be aware of that. So the Niti Aayog says that out of, about 97% of justiciable causes don't come to the court. So only 3% come. So I told the lawyers that, look, what we are trying to earn our bread and butter out of is just those 3%. So what happens to the 97%? Why don't they come to the court? Where do they go? So either they go to some extrajudicial, means like police stations or the local, Gunda elements who bring about a forcible settlement, or they go to some local politician who uses a lot of pressure, or they just live with the conflict. They live with the dispute. So I said, what happens if you embrace mediation? You're offering them a legitimate method of resolving the dispute. And you will be getting that 97% of cases to you. So you're expanding the pie. It is not ADR, alarming drop in revenue. It's going to be RIR, remarkable increase in revenue. So that's how you have to look at it. And that was very well received. And I find a remarkable difference today where lawyers are not just cases that are pending in the courts. The cooperation is much more now than it was earlier. They are also bringing cases before they go to the court. So pre-litigation mediation is catching up in a big way in India. And I don't think the day is very far off because people do understand, the constraints as we, with 5 crore cases, with a very dismal judge population ratio that we have, and the fact that the government is the biggest litigant in this country, in our country, in India. I don't know how it is in Ireland, But in India, the government is the biggest litigant. Now, one area where we really need to address this is how is the government going to be able to use mediation to resolve these problems? Like the US, several federal statutes mandate mediation. So we need something like that. And usually the officials are very scared to resolve disputes because tomorrow they may be called into question as to why did they take such a decision or why did they settle for something less. So they are scared of that. So that is one issue that is there. So unless the government takes some steps, some proactive steps to make that happen, we will be able to address this backlog, I think, much more efficiently. So, but in conclusion, what I would like to say is things are looking very positive to me, and I'm very optimistic. I'm basically an optimist, so I see the glass half full. So I hope it fills up very fast.
I share your optimism, but I'm equally a bit of a realist. You mentioned the legislation in India. We have an act here in Ireland. Now, it was a very long gestation. It was longer than an elephant because the original proposals were nearly 20 years ago. The government committee on justice held open talks with interested groupings in 2012 about an act to deal with mediation in Ireland. And all the groups came along. There were various groups. And it was a bit like the various sects of the Catholic Church, with their slight variations on a theme, to the point where one of the Justice Committee actually said, it sounds like you need a mediator to mediate between your views. But they took on board the input. But then a 5-year gestation before the Mediation Act 2017 came online. And it became law as of the 1st of January 2018. And in January of 2018, I circulated all my colleagues around the country with the new court rulings. They had been enacted, but they weren't available. And I sent to the representative groupings of lawyers around the country, look, if you're interested, I will come down, I will do a presentation, I'll explain about it. I can make it as short as 15 minutes, I can make it as long as 3 hours, however long you want. And I was very surprised, between January and the end of June of 2018, both here and in the UK, curiously enough, I did 32 CPD sessions. But like that, and a line roughly the bottom third of the country, the reaction was, that's really interesting, that could work. The middle section or third of the country, as you went north, was, yeah, maybe, okay, we'll have to think about it. The top third, heading towards Northern Ireland, was, who on bleep thought that was a good idea? So there's resistance. Now, lawyers have an obligation in Ireland to advise about it. And they're supposed to give the clients information about mediation, information about mediators, explain the advantages, the benefits, the cost savings. And I'm actually doing a PhD by research in relation to the attitude of lawyers. And, next year the results will be out. But I can tell you in headline terms, lawyers in Ireland view that obligation as a bit of a tick box exercise. And look, here's some stuff about mediation, but don't worry about it. We have to make it to the door of the court. So, unfortunately, the lawyers are still the gatekeepers very much. But what about the clients? I mean, what's the attitude of clients to mediation when they discover this hidden treasure in India?
Okay. Well, again, I'm very positive about that. Yes, there is some, as I already said, there is a cultural issue of how we are unable to take decisions on our own, but that is changing with the, with the new generation. The millennials we have nuclear families now. We don't anymore have joint families where there's a patriarch who takes decisions and you defer to those decisions. People are now becoming more and more independent. So the younger generation is more open to ideas of, taking decisions on their own, resolving conflicts and moving on with their lives. Having said that, see, one more aspect is, it is all about the emotion, because how strongly you feel that you have been wrong and how strongly you feel that the other side should be punished. So this is where the role of a mediator comes, because that is where you need to first empathize with them, understand the pain where it is coming from, help them to deal with that. So in a way, we act as counselors or psychiatric counselors or something like that, and then we slowly move them towards looking at the future, as you said earlier. So we try to help them to see what is best for them in the future. So that is where I think the mediation process, the way we structure the process, becomes very important. Because we first establish the trust and rapport by demonstrating the empathy and understanding what exactly they're going through. But in spite of all that effort, what happens is ultimately they would like to have their day in the court. Okay, so it's basically they believe in karma. They believe that everybody will get what they deserve. So they feel that rather than resolving, it's better that we leave it to destiny to decide for us what is going to happen. Now, when they reach that stage, it becomes very difficult to move them out of it. So what is needed is before they reach that stage. So that is where I see a lot of value in resorting to mediation before people go to the court, before they actually have gone to the court, because it helps them to see the reality, to focus more on the future. Because once they go to the court and they have spent a considerable amount of time and money, the sunk cost bias sets in. So we have already spent so much. So let's go the whole hog and see what happens ultimately. Let the destiny decide what happens. So this is how the clients normally approach. Just today, I was doing a mediation between a developer and a property owner. And there was a lot of emotion over there, a lot of anger. But surprisingly, today they were able to move beyond that, and they were able to start discussing as to how they can resolve this. So this was the third session that I had with them. And in the third session, we could make a lot of headway, which we could have, because I was on the verge of giving up. Looking at the way they were going at each other in the first session. But in the third session, I could see a remarkable progress happening. A lot of change coming in the way they were thinking about the whole dispute. So this is again a case where there's an arbitration pending, and they have realized how much it's going to cost them in the arbitration. So that is one factor that is motivating them to find a solution. So, with clients, yes, in India, we have these cultural factors, the deep religiosity that people have, their belief in their destiny, their faith, the belief in God, that God will do justice ultimately. More than the courts, they believe in God, so that they feel that if God wills it, the judges will decide in their favor. But when you move past all these things and you're able to deal with this and help them to look at the future, that is where the turning point comes. And many times what we see is in the mediation, they may not resolve, but you have set them on that journey of thinking about the dispute from a different perspective, from a more collaborative perspective, rather than looking at it completely from an adversarial perspective. So when you help them to move from their positions and help them to see their interests, even if they don't settle in the mediation, sometime later they settle. And that has happened many times because maybe at that point of time, they were not ready for the resolution. But later on, they realize the futility of the whole thing and they resolve it. So yes, so clients, they need to be, spoken to. They need to be understood, especially the emotional part of it. I think that because we say that any dispute resolution process should meet the requirements of the satisfaction triangle. There should be more, the procedural satisfaction. There should be the substantive satisfaction as to what exactly is going to be the outcome. And more important is the emotional satisfaction. So once that feeling of vindication comes, the feeling that, okay, somebody has heard and understood. I always tell people that, the day you walk into a lawyer's office, you lose your identity. You become a client. The day you go to the court, you're a plaintiff or a defendant. You're not Bill, you're not Jawad. You're not His Excellency Mr. Akhilesh Mishra. You're a petitioner, you're a respondent, you're a plaintiff, you're a defendant, you're a so-and-so witness. Where is your identity? Who bothers about what you feel about the dispute in the court? The only opportunity you get to open your mouth is when you're being cross-examined by the other side lawyer. And there your answers have to be yes or no. You don't get the chance to speak. Whereas in mediation, we listen to what is important for you. We pay attention to what you feel is important for you, not what your lawyer feels.
Sometimes,
So,
I'll give you an example. I think I might have shared this one with you before. A number of years ago, I was asked to mediate between two brothers. Now, there was a slight age difference. There was 10 years between the brothers. The older brother was kind of the sales, outgoing, Rotary Club member, hail fellow well met, networking, bringing in the business. The younger brother was more analytical. He was the spreadsheets, he was the finance, the planning, etc. But the young, and a very successful business that had been growing year on year on year. But suddenly the younger brother said, I want to sell. I think the business has no future. I want to sell. I want to get my money. I want to go to the United States and set up there. And the older brother was, what? We've another 20 years business growth here. No, you're wrong. This business is still growing. And they had different styles and they didn't communicate well because the elder brother would kind of come up with 10 discussion points. The younger brother would come back with 28-page spreadsheets and projections. So they were on the point of getting ready to ask the Irish High Court to wind up the company. Or at least the younger brother was, because he felt this was his only way of getting money from the company to go to America. So we started mediating, and myself and another very good Irish mediator, a good friend of mine, Keith Kelleher, we spoke with them, and the younger brother confided in me, because you have to build trust very quickly in the process, but he trusted me enough to tell me something he hadn't even told his own brother. And the younger brother had married late in his 30s, and he and his wife had tried to have children. And they couldn't do it naturally. They had tried to get IVF. They'd failed a number of times. And he had rationalised that in Ireland, if you want to adopt a child, you have to go through a 7-year process of assessment by the adoption authorities. And then you get a certificate saying, yes, this man is not mad. He and his wife was also not mad, are suitable potential parents. But there wouldn't be the children to adopt. Whereas if you went to the United States, the NSA watches every move for 2 years, but after 2 years, they would be eligible to adopt. And it was the desire for a child to have a family that was motivating this. But he hadn't told his older brother. So he trusted me to convey this to the older brother. And immediately the older brother said, oh, look, absolutely, of course, if that's the story, no, I'll sell the business. And I said, well, hang on a second. And this was the business lawyer in me. I said, look, you don't have to sell. You own a number of properties in the company. What you could do is you could sell the properties, but rent them back. So you now don't own them, you rent them. But this will generate a pot of money in the company. The brother can cash out without having to sell the company. And he did. He went to the States. He remained as an executive director or non-executive director of the company. He wasn't involved in the day-to-day, but he still was a member of the board. He remained as a shareholder. And 5 years later, they decided they were going to sell the company. And the valuation at the time, 5 years later, was 10 times greater than the value at the time of the mediation. But when the lawyers are leading the charge into the 4 courts in Dublin, asking a judge to look at the technical law about he wants the company wound up, he doesn't want it wound up, and they're talking about valuations and spreadsheets and monetary things. And the simple desire to have a child was the unspoken agenda in this. And it would never have come out in court. But the beauty of mediation is it allows for something like that. And now the two of them, the two brothers hugged. They were close brothers anyway, but they hugged and cried when this was identified as a solution. And the pure joy that as a mediator you feel when something like that happens, it's incredible. But
can you hear me? Hello. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I lost the connection for some time. I can't.
There are various training.
Some of the challenges of technology.
There are various groups who focus on one thing. For example, the Mediators Institute would be more on the community mediation, elder mediation, the softer end of things, if you like. There's then a group called the progress. But it is down to the question of the training. So what is required of mediators to be able to say that they are trained in India? Because I often give talks to groups of lawyers, and it might be an afternoon talk, but I say, you're all now accredited mediators because you're now accredited by the Church's bill, for whatever that is worth. But it's a real question of, what goes into the training. So what is the training like in India?
See, we have this 40-hour training module that we follow, Bill, here. So it's spread over 5 days of continuous training. And in some of the private trainings that we do, we have an assessment also, because I work for ADR ODR International, that's based in London. So when we do trainings, it's for 6 days, which includes 1 day of assessment. But in the other trainings, for example, the one that the MCPC, the Mediation Conciliation Project Committee of the Supreme Court does, it's a 5-day training. There is no assessment there. But what we do is, in those 5 days, we try to talk about the skills that are required for a mediator. We talk about communication skills. We talk about negotiation skills. We talk about the importance of emotional intelligence, of listening. So all these skills are discussed and we are made to practice a little. But my belief is that that is simply not enough, because that's only a starting point. So you need to undergo further training. You need to undergo further study. Like, you need to work with different organizations, get some practical experience, understand what kind of difficulties, perhaps work with other mediators who have been there for a considerable period of time, who are more experienced, understand the nuances from them, and then, call yourself really as a qualified mediator. But as of now, we accredit mediators after they get trained for 40 hours. And they are out there doing mediations, especially in the court annex program. So we have some challenges there, but we are slowly trying to overcome that. We are trying to, improve the quality of the training. We're trying to improve the quality of the trainers. So it's a work in progress, actually, over here. So that's what. And just before I conclude, I just want to share a small experience with you, because you said about the two brothers. I had something very similar, because in our Indian context, we respect elders a lot. So this was a mediation where there was a partition dispute between siblings. The eldest brother was denying the share of the other sibling. And there was a lot of bad blood. They couldn't see eye to eye. They were abusing each other. Everything was happening there. And the mother was attending every session of the mediation. And I could see the pain and anguish in her eyes. So I used to talk to her and, be nice to her, listen to what she has to say. The mediation failed. And just as I was getting up to walk out of the room, the mother told me that, son, I don't know who you are, but so far you're the only person to have ever listened to me at least. But, unfortunately, nothing could come out of it. I don't know how to thank you. So I just looked at her. Something in me made me feel that I could really empathize with her. So I called her, we call mother as Amma in South India. So I said, Amma, I don't want you to thank me. Just give me your blessings. That's enough. I said that and I touched her feet and I walked out of the room. And I was sitting outside the mediation center talking to my colleague. 10 minutes later, the brothers come up to me and say, sir, we have decided to settle. I said, what made you change your mind? I said, we saw that you, a third person, could be so considerate to our mother, whereas we were causing her so much pain and anguish to her. So we thought that let's resolve this and let's finish this once and for all. So little give and take here and there. We don't mind, but let us settle it. So I went back into the room and then we discussed the modalities and it was over. So I don't think this can happen in the court at all. The human element of that, that is what is missing out in litigation. So, and this is not just for in disputes where relationships are involved. Even in commercial disputes, purely commercial disputes, there's a whole lot of emotion there because there might be anger, there might be disappointment, there might be distrust. So once these issues are addressed, the solution comes from the people, from the participants themselves. So I think that's very important.
It's very interesting that you mentioned about the elders. And the fact is the same. In Ireland, after 40 hours, you can have a piece of paper that says you're competent. Now, after about 40 hours of lessons, you could probably get a license to drive a vehicle as well.
Yeah.
But we all know highest incidence of accidents are with the younger people.
Yes.
You have to learn by experience. And I always try to bring in, as a co-mediator, a younger person to give them a mentoring opportunity, a training opportunity. But equally, similar vein to what you're talking about, I had mediation in recent months, and a young lawyer came in. Now, we won't hold it against him. He's not a solicitor, he's a barrister. But he came in, and it was an issue involving two older brothers. And there was a lot of resentment between them because they had an understanding as distinct from a legal agreement. And one brother had taken advantage of the other. But here was this young man who gave an insight in the same way that the children of these two brothers would have given an insight. Now, the children weren't in the room, but he said, I can imagine what your son-stroke daughter might be thinking. And it was actually, it didn't resolve the issue again, but it completely turned the perspective around. And there was a new understanding, all because of a young person's perspective. So it's not just the old and the grey like me. You still have your hair, it's not grey yet. The beard is getting there, right?
But I'm your age, Bill. Let's not forget I'm your age now. So
we're almost the same age, but you're better looking than I am.
Thank you.
What about the attitude of the judges then? What's their attitude towards mediation?
I would rather credit the judiciary for bringing mediation to where it is in India, because but for the judiciary's support and the push, particularly the Supreme Court and the High Courts, the way they have been pushing mediation, that has led to it has been quite a journey actually, because but for their support and but for the fact that they are pushing it really hard, I don't think it would have come this far. And that has given a kind of a seriousness to mediation, and even lawyers are taking it seriously simply because the judiciary is taking it seriously. Because the judiciary understands what is happening and understands because the judiciary is carrying this burden, right? So they want to look at ways and means of trying to unburden themselves. So mediation is a good option there, so judiciary is taking it quite seriously. Of course, there are exceptions because some judges feel that what is it that we can't do that the mediators can do. So there's some kind of a baseless rivalry that is sort of created in the minds of the judges, but very few of them, fortunately. But majority of the judges, especially of the higher judiciary, very much in favor of mediation. And in fact, the Mediation Conciliation Project Committee has started training High Court judges in mediation. Not for them to do mediations, but to understand the process, understand its nuances, so that when they refer cases to mediation, they know what is going to happen to them. Because that becomes very important. Because if they don't understand the process, many times they feel that, for example, when I was in district a couple of days back, the lawyers were saying that the judges are insisting that in matrimonial mediation, you have to bring about a reconciliation between the spouses. And only then you will get your honorarium that is paid by the court. So we had to clarify that, look, that's not what is required from a mediator. A mediator basically helps the parties to resolve in the way they feel best. So there's no point in bringing a couple together if they can't see eye to eye with each other and their life is going to be more miserable living together than living separately. So that cannot be your yardstick. You cannot impose this yardstick on the mediators. and tell them that you have to bring about reunion between the couple. So that was clarified to them. So there are some misconceptions like this, but we are working on it. It's a work in progress again. And, again, I see the glass half full. So let's see how it goes on. Maybe in my lifetime, I may not see it, but hopefully my grandsons will be able to see the result of this, what we are doing today.
But in Ireland, again, the judges are very supportive because it lessens their workload and they can clear the lists. The judges in Ireland, a lot of them also went under training in mediation in recent years, particularly on the higher courts. Now, the cynics would say that they're laying the foundations for another career when they retire as judges. They become very expensive, very well respected senior legal figures, and that when someone is going to choose a mediator, they'll say, we can get a former High Court judge or Supreme Court judge, as a thing from an ordinary common citizen like me. And now that would be the cynics. But a lot of them have undergone training, and they're also members of a group called GEME, G-E-M-N-E. Now, I won't give you the French title, but it's a group of lawyers for mediation, and it's a European grouping. And again, not that we're second-class citizens, but mere mortals who are not judges are allowed to become members. You don't have voting rights, but you can be a member. But they're very much facilitated, and they will always ask, before they will agree to hear a case, have you tried to mediate? Now, we're back to the issue of, mediating in good faith. Again, there's some evidence that some people will agree to mediate. They will turn up and then they will sit like this, the arms crossed, the legs crossed, the face crossed, everything crossed, and that they won't have to engage. But they can tick the box and they can go in, oh, yes, Judge, we tried to mediate, it didn't work out, but we're good boys, we're good girls, as the case may be. But anyway, that's cynical. I'm conscious that we could spend all night talking, but the ambassador and the staff are busy people. Perhaps this might be a suitable point to adjourn and maybe pick it up at another stage, unless you have some more of the words of wisdom to throw into the pot.
You want me to say words of wisdom?
Absolutely.
Well, my wife is going to seriously challenge that. Well, my only the only thing that I can say is basically we human beings are hardwired for empathy. We don't like conflict unless we are forced into it. And of course, there are exceptions. People who Bill Eddy calls us high conflict personalities. But we are not talking about the exceptions. We are talking about the general people like us. We don't like to have conflict in our lives. And we like to be free of conflict. So what we need to do really is think about, because see, today the world is seeing so much of conflict today. And the only reason being that one is fear, the other is, that fear leads to distrust. So all we have to do is sit across and talk to each other. And because we have our own biases, we have our own perceptions, we need a neutral person to sit there and tell us that, look, can we look at it this way too? Is there a different point of view possible? Is there a different perspective possible? So we need that person whom we otherwise call as a mediator. So if we can sit and talk across and resolve our conflicts peacefully, I think a lot can be achieved for human progress. And the amount of money that we are spending, in fighting these wars and fighting these battles, what are we doing? I mean, where are we heading? As such, the climate change and the environmental factors are taking us to the brink of extinction. And we are just expediting the process by fighting these wars. So on a larger scale, as well as on a macro, as well as a micro level, I think what is more important is peace. And I feel that mediators are basically peacemakers. And as Jesus Christ said, blessed are the peacemakers. So let's hope we have more and more peacemakers. And with the good offices of His Excellency, I hope that, we are able to spread this word and we are able to build this relationship with Ireland, make it much more stronger, and share our knowledge, share our experiences, share our native wisdoms to see how we can bring in peace in this world.
The immortal words of a good Supreme Court judge, I concur.
Thank you.
And back to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jawad, and my dear friends, Holohan. This was a really fascinating program discussion. And as you said, we could have also loved to spend many more hours listening to your very enriching, illuminating conversation. We all learned a lot, and also the listeners of this program would have benefited. I think there will be a lot of opportunity for friends who are passionate about mediation to learn from each other's experience. Also, the training you mentioned, that 40 hours training in Ireland and similar training in India, the content of training could also be compared, and this will be very fascinating. Like what kind of skills are being imparted to mediators in Ireland and what we are doing in India. It will be very interesting. And also, as a diplomat, I think the skills involved in mediation are very relevant for me also. So I would love to get exposed to the kind of training that you give to your people going for litigation, for mediation. Second aspect, like you mentioned, that in India, like people are genuinely a lot of religiosity, and they have faith in the Almighty that eventually He will redress the balance and give us justice. So, do you see that number of cases per million population in India is lower than other countries? For example, I heard that in the US, people are extremely prone to litigation. Like in terms of overall macro numbers, do you see a pattern? Like in India, we are...
No, sir. As I said earlier, this is Niti Aayog's data. Niti Aayog says that 75 to 97% of cases don't come to the court at all. So I would not really call India as a highly litigious country, but though in terms of the population and in terms of the pendency of the cases, it looks as if we are a highly litigious country. But actually we are not. So we don't really believe in litigation so much.
I thought, like, my idea was to get a picture of per million population, how many cases of litigation we have in India and maybe in Ireland. Per million population, how much is the number of cases that are generated for litigation? Density. Yeah. Because that is a way.
Off the top of my head, I wouldn't have that information. But again, there are lots of barriers in the sense that in Ireland, going to court is a very expensive operation. And a now retired Chief Justice said, in order to get to court in Ireland, you have to be one of two things: very rich or very poor. Now, there's a very badly funded legal aid system, and the threshold at which you have to survive yourself is set very low, so that it is literally the poor who can avail of a very slow, very inadequate public legal aid system. But it's the money that stops people going to court, and they don't understand there is another path. So the evangelists, like us, have a job to do. Now, we may be doing this when we're 90, and hopefully it will bear fruit, but there's a job to be done in educating people about the path to peace. Because it is, you said it, it's the peacemakers. We're trying to bring people together rather than facilitating a system that drives them apart. We'll see. We don't have crystal balls.
Yeah. Very critical factor in deciding whether to take a mitigation route or legal route. How heavily your court is, how densely it is occupied.
Yes.
Because in India, I would resist taking a legal route because I don't know when it will be resolved. Mediation has higher hope, I might get something very sooner. So I think, Jawad, that's a very important
point
in deciding, from client perspective.
Also, the cost Also the cost comparison, going for the judicial route and for the mediation route, like some idea, like
A tenth.
Okay, let me see.
Probably a tenth of the cost to mediate.
Yeah.
Because I have explained to clients, if you, we'll say it's a high court value case, it's a very serious issue. To get to the point where a barrister in Ireland or in India, perhaps, in their finery, in their black robes, which they donned in 1701 in mourning for Queen Anne and never took off since.
Yeah.
The point where the barrister for the plaintiff says, I appear for the plaintiff, minimum, you're talking about 50,000 euros to get to that point. And if the case is more complex, it could be double that, treble that. And sometimes the costs dwarf what is at stake. When I'm giving talks, there's a case in England, a famous case, which went all the way up to the Court of Appeal in the UK. And the costs ran to several hundred thousands of English pounds. What was at stake? A car worth £11,000. Whereas if they'd mediated early, hundreds of thousands, not thousands.
One time appearing for the whole case.
I think it's for the entire process. You are talking about the fees for the entire process.
Yeah. So it makes no economic sense. I mean, years ago, as part of a CPD, a continuing professional development course we ran one lunchtime, we did get a lawyer who's a bit elderly, very dyed in the wood, very traditional. He had been involved in mediation in representing a party. And we asked him to come along to talk about his experience. And he was given 20 minutes to speak, right, about his experience as someone late in his career participating in mediation. And I can quote his entire speech because he stood up and in his broad Cork accent, he said, this mediation business, you know what? I was very suspicious. But you know what? It got sorted. The client was happy. I got a great fee. He sat down. Now, we had to try and work out how we're going to do it next 19 and a half minutes. But tremendous applause. But he summed it up. You know, it got sorted. The client was happy, and he got a great fee. Win, win, win. Whereas if you go to court, you could come out of court, and it's lose, lose. You will never in a court have win, win.
Absolutely. Just to answer that question of how much it is going to cost in terms of time and money, let me put it this way. It's going to cost you 1% of the monetary component of what you're going to be spending in a court case, and 0.1% of the time that you will be spending in the court, less than 0.1%. Okay, I can say this confidently. Okay, I can say this confidently. And what I would also like to add here is this, that this is a completely without prejudice process. You lose nothing by going for mediation. So why not try mediation before you choose to go to the court or choose to go for arbitration? Try it. It's not going to cost you much. Just try it. If it fails, it fails. You go to the court. You always have that option. It's not going to affect your rights in any way. It's not going to take away anything from you. It will help you to have a better perspective of what you can expect from the court. Even if the process fails, it will succeed in the sense that it will give you an idea as to where exactly you stand. Because you will be hearing a neutral perspective of your case. You'll be able to understand a neutral perspective of your case. Because you're looking at it from your perspective and your opposite party is looking from her perspective. So who's right and who's wrong? That is what the judge is going to decide. And the judge is not going to take your perspective or her perspective. The judge is going to put his perspective and say that this is what is right. But here you have an opportunity of looking at each other's perspective and trying to find a solution that would work for both of you. So try that. You're going to be spending perhaps 1% of what you're going to be spending in the future. If it resolves, good for you.
When you talk about perspective, a phrase leaped to mind, a quote from a poet again. Two men looked out through the prison bars. One saw the mud and one saw the stars. So it is perspective, but when I do arbitration work as well, I sit as a private judge for people who don't want the publicity of being in court. But I explained to them at the start of the process, look, there are 4 perspectives and 4 views on what happened. Number 1, there is the plaintiff's perspective. Number 2, there is the defendant's perspective. Number 3 is what probably actually happened, not what they perceive it to be. But the most important one, and sometimes the most dangerous one, is the view that the judge, the arbitrator, the adjudicator, the decision maker decides, which may not accord with any of the foregoing 3. Whereas with mediation, if you have a commonly agreed outcome, it's a shared perspective for the future. As I said, we could go on all night, but thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Very good summary.
Great to sound.
Okay, if somebody has any more questions to ask?
We have 10,000 questions, but I think we'll
You're going to have to drink coffee or tea on your own.
Yeah.
Jawad. We might have a cup here, but we'll raise a glass to toast you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much, Mr. Holohan and Mr. Jawad. This was really an interesting and informative session for all of us. Earlier, I thought it's going to be a very heavy talk, laden with the difficult legal terminology. But thank you. It's really interesting and informative for, I think, everyone and the viewers who are watching it.